Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I do feel kind of slimy.
I thought it was going to be sexier, and I don't know why.
No.
It's
not sexy. It's real icky. It's like, ugh.
Hello, everybody. I am Will.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is So I'm Watching the American Crime Story, Impeachment,
Good save.
episode 2. And then he kissed me?
The president kissed me.
The president kissed me. They should have played that.
They should have played And Then He Kissed Me. That's a good song.
Oh, boy. I mean, I am absolutely enjoying this. This was way more Monica. We got Bill.
Yep.
Let's start with Bill. How are we feeling about Clive Owens?
I'm feeling fine about it. It's hard to lose Clive Owen even in the prosthetics, because I think he still looks like Clive Owen. I think he looks enough like Bill that it's working. And he's doing a voice, which is also helping and working, but the voice is also like Bill Clinton's current voice. It sounds less like Bill Clinton's 1994 voice.
I think it's good. I think it's very good.
It's not bad.
No. It's veering on caricature for me.
A little.
In a way that I'm not sure how you wouldn't do that. It's
I would say this is, I think, picking Clive Owen was the way to make this the least caricature-y as possible.
Well, and he's sort of he's famous, like he's a big star, but not quite in an unattainable way. Like, I don't know. It really there was something about it where I thought, okay, that feels right.
He also hasn't been like a big star since the early 2000s. So I'll tell you what, he is working the like charisma aspect of it for sure.
which was famous. I mean, up to and including my aunt worked, my aunt and uncle were involved in Washington, and my aunt had been on all of the presidential flights, I think, starting with Carter.
Yeah.
And she talked about how she has pictures with all of them. Mm-hmm. She talked about how charming Bill Clinton was.
I believe it.
That it was just like, whew.
Do you know what struck me about this episode? What's so interesting, and we obviously haven't gotten there within the show yet, but we obviously all know how the history went. We're old enough. What struck me is that it's the consensual relationship that got everything fucked up. He like preyed on all these other women and did things like against their will. And it's the relationship that he was in consensually with another woman that brought everything crashing down.
Yeah, I didn't even think about
that. Is that not wild?
Yeah. Your husband pointed out in the first episode that it's like watching a horror film.
Oh, for sure.
This was more like watching a snuff film. There was a handful of scenes, but this was also sort of like watching a horror film, but reverse. Like you sort of like, this was Fatal Attraction.
Sort of. It was.
In a way.
Because Monica was having so many crazy eyes. Crazy eyes and like really, really, really deep down in that, like, he's just not that into you. Like, territory, but like no one was there to tell her he's just not that into you.
And it's gotta be like, because we established that she had, her own issues and self-esteem stuff. And it's gotta be, I mean, to have, a man into you this way, let alone it being the president.
Yeah.
And there's so much of it that it's like she's having fun with it too. I mean, she even in this was posing it like she was the one flirting with him. Like she's the one putting it down.
Like she's teasing him too romantically.
But there's
the scenes with them together, like Beanie and Clive Owen. Oh my God. They are really playing off each other well too. I think they have really good chemistry.
Well, there's a point this whole time where it's just like, like you said, it's he's just not that into you. She's waiting by the phone. We're dealing with a lot of cliches.
She's not going out with her friends. She's canceling out of town trips with her friends at the last minute. So she's just going to not show up at the airport and like at the destination.
Well, and there's like, she goes to bring him presents and his secretary is like, oh, I'll make sure he gets them. And it gets to this really pathetic place. And every time that she starts to like snap out of it, he gives her
just a little bit. He's got her on the hook.
But then there's this scene after the election where they're together and he thanks her for the gift she gave him. And then he gives her gifts. And I was just sort of like, what's it going to be like? The M&Ms from Air Force One? Like, blah.
No, they're like thoughtful gifts.
They're like nice gifts. And I was like
an antique hat pin and a copy of Leaves of Grass because he was thinking about her in a sad moment.
In Miami. And I was just like, oh, that's worse.
It's way worse.
because I just like the whole time I was like, ugh, what a schmuck. And then I was like, ugh, because she just so completely. And there's a part where he's like, I know how like other guys have treated you. I don't want this to get like too far, blah, blah, blah. And there's a part of me where I'm like, I see the best in a lot of people and situations.
Yeah.
Does he mean any of this? I mean, on some level, he kind of has to have cared about her.
He must have cared about her at least a little bit, because I just think there's no other reason, because he also was just apparently willy-nilly like accosting women all across the White House.
Because otherwise she would have pinged his crazy meter and he would have,
Yeah. And so that's the reason why while we were watching, I was like, do you think he actually loves Hillary? And you guys were like, well, probably he prefers the way that she makes him better. And so it's in that sense, I'm like, well, to risk so openly blowing up your entire life and the well-being of an entire country for this woman, I feel like it must mean something more. You know what I mean?
And there was a very specific scene where he's playing solitaire in the Oval Office. Yeah. And this is film. Nothing is by accident.
Sure.
If you ever see anything on screen, it was on purpose. And there was a part of me that was sort of like, it didn't 100% feel in character. It didn't feel out of character. Like for a hot minute, I'm like, is this a W? Like playing card games are you supposed to be? And I just, I remember, as I've mentioned, growing up, my household was moderately conservative. And I remember hearing all this stuff about how like, oh, he governed by the polls. And there was all this stuff about how like, oh, Hillary was really the one running things behind the scenes. And so there was an element, I was like, is this a show kind of admitting that he's kind of just bored? And like,
I think it was more the fact that he's alone. It's a very solitary profession. You're not allowed to like have people
the solitaire
around you.
Yeah.
Which is what he said about how he was like, he wasn't allowed to go out alone in Miami and be anonymous. He just had to have the Secret Service drive him around.
Which, I mean, that's fair. That's a fair plight. But just to be putting it on this young girl.
Oh, yeah. No. Because what is she, like, maybe 22 at this point?
She's 22 or 23. Like, wow, this is all going on.
She's too young.
And there's just, like, it really, like I said, it's like a snuff film because it's like,
well, especially because we know how it's going to end.
Yeah. And so there's a scene where it's like, and they're telling it out of story or out of order, which is an American Crime Story.
Classic.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm sort of like, I don't remember what happens when, and they tell you, but I don't always retain that information. I'm never sure exactly where in the story we are. And so there's a scene where she brings Linda to her house and she's like, do you want to see the dress? And I'm like,
I thought it was the blue dress too.
The air went out of the room because we're just, it's like watching a horror film. Yeah. Like we're just sort of like, oh my God.
But it was blessedly a gorgeous red dress. I mean, stunningly beautiful.
And the thing is, it's like, I need some of that.
Yeah.
Like we got her with the flashing the thong, which was another one of the sword details.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and
again,
that stupid fucking beret.
We need some of that, but taste wise, figuring out how, like, I had a like musing where I was like, could you imagine Paul Verhoeven doing it with this material? Like
she would be like bent over the table with her whole ass out.
Unsimulated sex scene. Like, I don't get Linda Tripp.
No.
I don't think we're going to.
No. I think, especially at this point, the fact that she has died in real life, I think she is a little unknowable.
Which her daughter said that she'd seen like the first episode or two or something, and she said it was a relatively accurate and borderline, she didn't say flattering, but she was sort of like, this is one of the first depictions that got that there was more to her.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I mean, what else do you expect from Brian Murphy and Sarah Paulson?
Yeah. I kept feeling like I wasn't understanding. And then, because I did watch this twice, and the second time I was like, oh, are they doing that on purpose? Because there's moments where she actually seems genuinely curious, sometimes titillated, sometimes envious, sometimes like...
Yeah. And I think there also are moments where she seems genuinely affectionate towards Monica. Like, she's like, well, I'm taking you antiquing. This is the last straw.
And for Monica to have this, like, for lack of a better word, cool, older friend at work who... I mean, to listen to her talk is impressive. And I mean, who's to say from Monica's perspective, like, and her fucking cube mate It's
the
like
two of them. Can we get a workplace
situation
like
comedy
an odd couples
with the
workplace
studio audience
sitcom?
Well, I started to say, you know that song Popcorn? That
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a cover song of Popcorn in a minor key. Like the two of them going back and forth. It's like an ominous.
You know, Linda's chewing too loud. Linda's phone is going off, but this bitch is stapling all crazy and she's shouting at Linda from across the room in the Pentagon.
And there's a lot of
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I love how Linda expects her not to listen into her conversations. They're sitting like 3 feet apart from each other.
But there's a scene where Linda is with her, oh God, just absolutely pathetic little microwave dinner.
She keeps eating the Salisbury steak. That's the worst one.
Watching the inauguration.
Yeah.
And it almost goes to this like fantasy world where
Yeah.
I'm like, and watching the scene both times I was sort of, and not necessarily in a bad way, but I was like, what is the point of this scene?
Yeah.
Is she envious? Is she, and I think that maybe that's that
Absolutely.
we don't really know. So the production is sort of like,
I'm sure she was full of some envy. And, you know, we talked about it a little bit in the first episode, but it was like she was in a position where she felt very important and then she was demoted and now she doesn't feel important. And so literally the point of her in this scenario, in this show, is she's trying to regain her feelings of importance. And so that's why she talks to, what's his name?
Mike
Istikov?
something from
Mike?
Newsweek.
Yeah. And that's why she goes to him and is like, well, you're barking up the wrong tree. You don't have the real story about Kathleen, about Elizabeth Reeser. And so I just think that this was all about trying to claw her way back to importance. And instead she clawed her way to infamy, which is like not the same thing.
Well, and again, at least the way the show is depicting it, at any moment, her motives kind of sway a little bit. Because you're right. I mean, when she starts off with Monica, it seems like she's actually, when Monica finally confesses, she like talks Monica back into the relationship.
Monica is like, no, I'm out. It's obviously over, whatever.
That I couldn't figure. No. I couldn't figure it out. And then.
Well, I think at this point, it's because she's trying to sell the book to Margot Martindale.
So you do think it was that she's trying to...
I think that's why she did that.
Because when they are trying to find the pattern, I was like, is she actually trying to find a pattern or is she documenting this?
Both.
So that she has like...
Yeah.
Like,
definitely both. I mean, I think the fact that a pattern emerged was lucky, but I think definitely both.
I think the most striking scene for me was the inauguration scene where she was just sort of watching it almost like it was very, very Norma Desmond, very Sunset Boulevard.
Well, they also were doing these insane close-ups on like half of her face, and in that sense, it was feeling very like a Requiem for a Dream to me. All the Ellen Burstyn parts of Requiem for a Dream. Yeah,
it's kind of like that documentary, the 6 Feet from Stardom.
Yeah,
where it's like to be so close, but like still far. Completely anonymous.
Yeah.
Oh boy, Paula Jones.
Bless her heart.
Well, she also saw the first episode or two, I don't know how many, and was not pleased.
Not a fan.
It's not a flattering portrayal. It's not an unflattering portrayal. I remember my thoughts of Paula Jones, my memory of her was but one of a plethora of clowns in a 3-ring circus.
Sure.
And this is portraying her as like a bumpkin who was being used and manipulated. And
manhandled. But also, I think... it's portraying her as a human person, which I think is nice. There's always you never gonna, I don't know, did Annalee Ashford meet her? Probably not. It's like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, she's going off of this script and probably interviews with other people that they were able to get. And then she's going off of like, just trying to put a human person in this character. I think I'm feeling sympathetic towards her. So
I never really realized how like, well, I think we said in our first episode what just an overall debacle this whole thing was. And then enter Judith Light as Susan Carpenter McMillan. I mean, I guess that's a real person. I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
In her own twisted sense, she seems like she is trying to actually kind of help Paula.
I think she's trying to make her more legitimate, like she's trying to legitimize her on a world stage so that she can present herself in a better way than she had been doing.
I don't know if she sees her as an opportunity to sort of launched this brand, this conservative feminism brand, which, I mean, try as they might, still hasn't taken off.
I mean, it's a thing.
I mean, they say it. It doesn't.
Well, it's not like a movement like actual feminism, but like those are the white women.
Oh, well,
like, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because you get into this whole, I remember like with the Women's March, and they'd be like, you know, the liberals are,
we're done. We're not. Let's not do that. Whatever. It's fine. We know what we mean.
We all know how we feel about what's being said right now.
Also,
each and every one of us.
We don't need to be jibber jabber clowns again.
And then we have Kobe Smolder having an absolute blast.
Just eating her way through this.
Had a basketball on her finger and was sort of just like spinning it. And she did a couple of
Look, if this is what it takes for Kobe Smolder to get something again after How I Met Your Mother, like something I know that she was, but like only like a handful of the movies and like a very side character. She is nailing Ann Coulter. This like weird mix of New York and Midwestern accents.
So horrible, like little like thing. But it, again, grew up moderately conservative. There's a teeny tiny part of me that lives for Ann Coulter. Like there's like, and not anymore, not now.
And not in a political way. Yeah.
But she said like 3 or 4 things in this episode that I was like,
hilarious.
Lol.
Yeah,
like,
hilarious.
It's a take. You can't, no one else has an angle. And she like, it's like, at least she's steering a car. Like,
well, also I loved the moment where she like asked a question of one of the lawyers and he like answered her sincerely. And she goes, I have a law degree. That was rhetorical. Well, and I just was like, that's hilarious.
That's honestly all the notes that I have. We haven't gotten anything from Edie Falco really yet. Oh, apparently Mira Sorvino's in this show.
Oh, what? Who is she?
She was in this episode.
Who was she?
Monica's mother.
That was Mira Sorvino?
Yeah.
Oh.
Watch the scene again. It's there.
Okay.
When you can't unsee it when you do, but another point in the Ryan Murphy is awesome column.
We love Mira Sorvino. I think she's just the best.
If you don't know, she's one of the ones who was destroyed by Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now she's getting a little bit of a...
She was in something else semi-recently.
Mm-hmm. She's getting a little bit of a...
It was like, she's been in a handful of good things lately. She was in Hollywood.
Right.
We liked her a lot in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ryan Murphy.
This is not currently on her IMDb, but I believe you.
Yeah, she was in the credits.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I did not.
Because I remembered seeing she was going to be, but I was like, who in this episode could she have possibly been?
Yeah.
Like I said, that is one of the things with the show that was with both O.J. Simpson and Versace is we know the thing. Like we know like what's happening.
So it's like it's just anxiety inducing waiting for it to happen.
And hopefully you learn something either, factually or emotionally along the way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're getting. The 90s, I don't know what to tell you. It felt at the time, it felt right.
Yeah.
Looking back, woof.
Woof, yeah. There's a lot that's not good.
Woof.
Yeah.
So
fashion, hair, a lot of things.
Oh, I don't know. They're killing it in this. This is through the lens of
I'm like, there are things that work, but also I like forgot what a boring beige dress Hillary wore to the inauguration. And I'm like, and Monica wore that knockout red number. Oh,
Judith Light is like,
all of her shit's amazing.
Her hair and just she's nailed that whole like whatever Hollywood where because too many like aging people try to look younger.
Yeah.
And it's about looking better.
She just tries to look more like herself, and she does. She looks great. She's so pretty.
All right. Well, hopefully you liked this. Let us know. And you can keep letting us know if you didn't.
Yeah. It's fun for us.
So tune back in next week, probably Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening.
Yep.
And we'll see you then.
All right. Bye.